Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. U.S.
guys.
history coming at you, Mr. Shaw,
Miss Willbrand.
ready to go. We're going to do 1.3 urbanization today. We're going to describe the causes of urbanization and the effects it had on Americans.
Let's do it.
All right.
All right, first up, immigrants settling in cities. So cities are going to expand quite rapidly during during industrialization as factories are built and manufacturers. I don't know what I'm trying to say. As businesses open up and there are more jobs available, more people are going to move into the cities to work those jobs. That makes sense, right? All right, so immigrants are going to settle in cities. Housing in cities is going to be cheap and convenient. We're going to see a lot of apartment buildings and things open up right next to the factories that are being built that people work in, and then you just kind of walk across the street and go to work and things like that, especially before public transportation takes hold and is really built up.
Well, and the Bessemer process with steel helps, like, you build higher buildings, which allows for more apartment complexes and things like that.
I think that's a different slide.
Oh, dang it.
Maybe not. I don't know. But that makes sense too, right? So we see steady jobs in mills and factories, like I just mentioned. And then in 1910, immigrant families add up to half the city population. Again, going back to our lecture on immigration, remember that immigrants are willing to work for less money compared to your average white American because they came so far for just anything better than what they had, and what they had was not that great back home. So even working for less here is still better than what they had, which is why that's the pull factor of America, right? Having a better life. And so we do see a huge rise in immigration, or immigrant families and populations in cities. Migration from country to city. So we also see, thanks to the Bessemer process, better farming equipment, which means you need less people to do the farming because farming equipment itself is more efficient. So we see tractors and steel plows and things like that. And because of that, needing less people means those laborers are going to need jobs, and so they're also going to move to the cities for employment. So, and then we also see black southern farmers losing their jobs. We see a lot of like tenement farmers in the South. And as farming gets more efficient, we see them lose their jobs and their land and move north as well.
And that's going to create a really big problem. Just when you see one of the biggest things that spawns this this really big change in America is like when African Americans or blacks and whites like get into the same area, especially during this time. Like there's going to be a lot of tension, and that tension is really spawned from slavery still. Mm-hmm. So whites usually tend to flee that sort of situation. We're going to talk about white flight, especially in the 1950s. But again, it does happen here too. That's just something to keep in mind. That is kind of a theme that we see throughout U.S. history.
If you haven't gathered from the other 2 lecture videos for this unit plus this one, we do a lot of foreshadowing in the industrialization unit. We're really setting America up to try to solve all the problems that industrialization and becoming a big, well-known nation in the world creates. So
let's do it.
Let's go.
So urban problems are really going to pop up around this time. Again, when you cramp a lot of people into small spaces, no real good can come of that. But on top of that, the government isn't really forcing any sort of like cleanliness standards. There isn't any street cleanup. We don't have things like even ambulances or indoor plumbing. Okay, all of these things, people would literally just take their poop and just throw it out the window sometimes. I mean, it's like that is, this is one of the most famous pictures from the industrialization era, and it's just these kids playing next to a dead horse. So these kinds of things are going to cause all kinds of problems. Sickness is going to spread very easily. And you see the rise of tenements. And these tenements are basically like really cramped apartment houses. And but imagine an apartment that's like normal and then like divided up into 4. And that's going to be kind of where these people lived because they really didn't have any other options. They like the American population increased so rapidly
Right.
that we had such a difficult time trying to accommodate all of these new immigrants, all of these migrants from the rural areas. So a lot of people were living in tenements. If you couldn't live in the tenements, you had to live in the slums. Sometimes you were living on the streets. And so there's just a lot of it's going to lead to a lot of health crises, which we see here. No building codes for safety. Again, the government, remember, laissez-faire, they're staying out of it. And again, so we'll eventually see the government say enough is enough. Like, we need to step up and start, taking care of this stuff, making sure that our people are safe.
And it's not even necessarily the government's choosing not to do anything. It's just that because America has never seen this kind of growth before, there are no policies in place yet. And so because it happened so quickly, there's just nothing happening to stop these things or to regulate it at all. And it takes a while for the government to be able to step in and say, okay, let's fix this, which is Unit 2, by the way.
And most Americans really don't, not most, like especially at this time, most Americans don't like government intervention. They don't want the government in their lives.
No.
And that wasn't the purpose of government, according to them. But we'll see that shift as well.
Yep.
Again, no public sanitation department to clean up the streets. Factory smoke and waste are just going to be rampant throughout the cities. The poverty, though, is really going to be the hardest part of the biggest problem of the cities. Many are going to take low-paying jobs, unskilled jobs in factories, mills, and even sweatshops. Really, they were like the sweatshop we think is like terrible, now, and it happens in other countries, but like that was, the norm when, like, during industrialization. The social stratification is really going to be evident during industrialization. Like, the poor and the rich become not only economically divided, but also geographically divided. If the cities are so disgusting, the rich people aren't going to want to live there anymore. So they're going to, this is where, as I mentioned in the previously, we see the rise of the suburbs. And it's not going to, the suburbs aren't going to explode until the 50s, but that process starts now.
All right, so we do see a rise in transportation, an evolution in transportation. So we originally just had like your horse and carriage type, using animals to get around. But with new advancements and industrialization, we see a huge number of technological improvements and discoveries as well. With electricity, we're going to get the electric streetcar, which is like a cable car, if you've ever seen that. Like San Francisco still has theirs. We see people biking and walking places. Eventually, with the automobile way down the road, we're going to see buses and things like that as well. As we see transportation go up, it means that people who have any kind of money at all do not have to live right next to the factory because they can afford the transportation to get to work. So they're going to live blocks or even miles away from the factory, and that's going to contribute to that the beginnings of the suburbs that we kind of talked about. And we're going to see cities start expanding outward. Water, we see indoor plumbing. It's really rare. Where there is indoor plumbing, it's not great. Sewer systems that we have, like there aren't a ton, cannot keep up with the growth of cities. So we're going to see a lot of waste in streets and stuff like Mr. Shaw was talking about. And then we're going to see that it's really easy for disease to spread. So one of the number one reasons that disease spreads in cities is unsanitary water. If there's no clean water or there's polluted water, it's a lot easier for like not just disease itself, but also like animals that carry disease like rats and insects and things like that. Where there's poverty, where there's a high population of people, where there's a high population of unhappy poor people, we also see crime, because a lot of times if you are poor and we talked about unlivable wages, you're not getting what you need to feed your family, you're going to do what it takes. And so crime starts there. And so we do see a rise in like the New York City Police Department and things like that as well to help fight the drastic increase of crime. And then fire. We talked, there's no real regulations, no real code, and so it's easy for things to catch on fire, especially when we have electricity and we have like bare wires and things like that, unsafe conditions, unclean conditions. We're going to see a rise in buildings burning down, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this later on in the unit as well. So we're going to do a little activity with a fire. So
Get excited. Nothing like burning flesh to really help you learn.
oh no.
Should we like? Oh no, never mind.
It won't be that serious.
It's not that serious. Sorry, got too intense.
It's been a long day.
So getting into the settlement houses now, if we've done one thing, hopefully we have told you that this was a very difficult situation, especially for immigrants coming into these cities, especially for the poor people who were living in the cities. So Jane Addams really started this settlement house movement with her house known as the Hull House in 1879. So basically what these were, they were community centers in slum neighborhoods, and they are going to really try to start this process of picking these impoverished people, mostly immigrants, kind of up off their feet, up off the ground, get them rolling, teach them skills that they're going to need to succeed. And things like English, even painting classes, teach them how to like take care of themselves, or like they probably knew how to do that, but who knows? Maybe not. Maybe if you had been in poverty for a while, you wouldn't know. And then they're also going to provide assistance to widowed or abandoned women. Women really get a tough role during the early American history, and in this particular time, it's really no different. Women were, if they were left by a man, they were really out of options unless their family would take them back. So the settlement houses started to kind of provide services for them to try to help them to make sure that they were okay. And really, this gets the idea of what is known as social mobility, and it's basically how do we help people to get from one social class to another? How can we get from poor to middle class? How do we get from middle class to wealthy? And in this case, the settlement houses, I'm sure you would agree, would really focus on the lower class getting to the middle class.
Right.
How do we help them to get to that point, and then they can be successful, have a good life, be able to take care of themselves, so on and so forth.
Giving people the tools they need to rise up in that social Darwin system that we kind of talked about, where if you have nothing, you're going to be nothing, but if you have something, you could be something great. So giving people those tools so they can achieve the American dream, if you will.
Love it. This is just one picture of the a painting class at one of the settlement houses.
Those cute kids.
So nice.
So nice.
I'll take this one too. So the city politics and the political machines, what you need to understand is that there was an opportunity here for somebody to take advantage of what was happening in the cities. And political machines are going to be the ones that kind of do that. We have so much urban growth. The government is really struggling to keep up. So what political machines are going to do is they're going to start organizing, and they're going to be able to kind of control the activities by providing services. So basically now they're going to say, hey, do you need a place to live? Hey, do you need a job? We can provide you those things. However, when it comes voting time, we need you to vote for this person. So basically they're bribing. They're bribing people for their votes. They're actually really providing a very good service to these new immigrants and to the impoverished people. However, it's really very illegal.
Say at the cost of democracy.
At the cost of an actual functioning democracy. But I imagine that most immigrants were probably more than willing to give that up. It's a really small price to pay, I imagine, for a roof over your head and a job. So anyway, and that's what I mentioned there. They offered services and businesses in exchange for political or financial support. And the political boss is the person that kind of managed that. The most famous two were Big Jim Pendergast in Kansas City, and then Boss Tweed in Tammany Hall, New York City. Again, I'm not really worried about you knowing these guys or knowing about political machines, but we're going to kind of talk about why they are relevant in the next unit and why we kind of need to change this. And this will get into it.
More of that foreshadowing for you.
Right. Do you want me to keep going?
If you want to.
I don't mind. I kind of already talked about a lot of this. So they're going to provide assistance to immigrants and minorities. They're going to understand the challenges they face. They're going to help them with the naturalization process, like the citizenship test that you guys are going to have to take. And they're going to help them find housing, jobs. They're also going to advocate for a lot of local communities and municipalities. And that's really what's interesting about that, is that they're really focused on the very local level. Like, we always think about politics and we think about, like, the president and Congress, but the politics at the local level are actually really important to how it affects your life on a daily basis. As I did mention, though, this is very, very corrupt. They manipulated elections. They had something called graft, which is the illegal use of political influence for personal gain. Again, like trading votes, for bribes and things like that. And then this is really kind of getting into the patronage and spoil system as well. It's the idea that you are going to hire government officials based on relationships and how long they've provided for you, rather than their qualifications. Something you might add to your notes there is that it's going to give jobs to people in the government that have no idea what they're doing, and that's not a way for government to function. Anything to add there?
So the victor goes spoils.
There you go. I like that. That's a good way to think about it.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about technology and city life. So we mentioned this earlier with the Bessemer process. We now can go up instead of out. So we see the development of skyscrapers. We see also huge bridges like the Brooklyn Bridge being built thanks to steel and a few other technological advancements. This allows cities to grow even faster and to accommodate even more people, which again goes back to like poor sanitation and all of that. So it's kind of just snowballs until Unit 2 when we start talking about progressivism. We already talked about streetcars, allowing it to spread outward, and then urban planning. So we see bridges, recreational spaces. So we are going to see like parks and things pop up. And then eventually zoning codes to help regulate some of these things to make things safer and better.
And I think what you need to understand is that when they first started these cities, they had no idea what they were doing. Like, they were just planning, they were putting things, buildings, like wherever they had space. And once they ran out of space, they were like, hey, we should have had a plan for this. Yep. And so then they kind of start doing that towards the end after the cities are already really kind of crowded.
Right.
I think that's it.
I think that's it.
Is that it? Hey, guys.
We're done.
Look at that. We're done. Under 20 minutes. Are you kidding me?
We did it.
We're the best. Hey.
See you guys later.
Take it easy.